The room was quieter than usual that morning, the kind of silence that didn't come from discipline, but from something unspoken. Officers sat around the long wooden table, their uniforms sharp, their faces serious. Maps and reports were spread out before them, but no one seemed fully focused. At the center of the room stood a young woman, her posture straight but her eyes uncertain. She didn't belong in a place like this, not officially, and yet there she was. She had been brought in without explanation. No rank, no introduction, just a name spoken quietly at the door. And then silence. Most of the men in the room barely looked at her. To them, she was just another civilian caught in something she didn't understand. But there was one thing about her that didn't fit, something small, but impossible to ignore. The necklace. It rested just below her collarbone, a detailed, antique piece, gold with a deep blue stone at its center. It didn't look like something you'd find in a market or a shop. It looked old, important, almost deliberate. One of the officers leaned slightly toward another. "Strange thing to wear here," he muttered under his breath. Another nodded. Probably just sentimental. But across the table, the colonel hadn't spoken a single word since she entered. At first, no one noticed. He'd been reading a document, or at least pretending to, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, his attention shifted, his eyes lifted, not to her face, to the necklace, and everything changed. The paper in his hand lowered just slightly. His expression, once calm, controlled, tightened in a way no one had ever seen before. It wasn't anger, it wasn't confusion, it was recognition. "Where did you get that?" he asked suddenly. His voice cut through the room like a blade. Every head turned. The young woman blinked, caught off guard. I've always had it," she replied softly. "It was my mother's." The colonel stood. Chairs creaked as the tension in the room shifted instantly. No one spoke. No one moved. He stepped closer, his eyes locked on the pendant, as if confirming something he didn't want to believe. "That's not possible," he murmured. Now the room wasn't just quiet, it was watching. The woman instinctively reached up, her fingers brushing the necklace. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice barely steady. The colonel didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened, and for a moment it looked like he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere far beyond that room. Then he spoke again, slower this time. "That necklace," he said, "was last seen over 20 years ago." A ripple of confusion moved through the officers. He looked at her, not as a stranger anymore, but as someone tied to something much deeper. He continued, "They disappeared, every one of them. No bodies, no records, just gone." The room felt smaller now, denser. "And that symbol," he added, nodding toward the pendant, "was theirs." Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't confusion, it was realization. The officers who had dismissed her moments ago were now staring, trying to piece together something that suddenly felt far bigger than any report on that table. The woman looked down at the necklace, her fingers trembling slightly. "My mother never talked about it," she whispered. "She just said it mattered." The colonel took a slow breath. Then, for the first time since she entered the room, his posture changed. Not authority, not command, something else. "Respect," he said. "Then she didn't just give you a necklace, she gave you a legacy." The words settled heavily in the air, because whatever that pendant represented, it wasn't just history, it was unfinished. And as the colonel stepped back, still watching her with a gaze that now held both caution and understanding, one thing became clear to everyone in that room. She hadn't been brought there by accident. She had been found.